Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you to today's webinar. I'm Fadi Azhari with CelerData, and I'm the host for today's session and the moderator for the whole time we're spending together this morning and this afternoon, this evening, depending where you are. The topic of our webinar today is real-time analytics use cases and a little bit of a deep dive into that. I'm delighted to be joined by two of the best thought leaders in the data analytics space, Dr. Prashanth Southekal, founder of the DBP Institute, and Sanjeev Chib, VP Product at Spenske. In today's session, we will cover the many facets of this great topic to try to understand real-time analytics use cases, how they impact decision-making in organizations looking to really drive growth in their business. And what does it really mean? So we're really going to do a double click into the use cases and what we mean by real-time analytics use cases in real examples. Before we turn it over to Prashanth and Sanjeev to introduce themselves, I'd like to tell you a little bit about actually CelerData. So CelerData is a company that is focused really on real-time analytics. We're a database company. We are the company behind StarRocks, the real-time analytics engine. We call it the real-time analytics made easy. There are four pillars and tenets to the benefits of our platform. One is we really offer industry-leading fast queries, blazing fast queries for both OLAP or ad hoc. We really can achieve sub-second query latency. And we have a flexible schema that allows to support both flat table and multi-table joins, which makes us really unique in the industry. And we can query lots of rows. So scalability is a big element on how we actually achieve the speed and the performance as well. We also believe that in order to achieve real-time analytics and make it a reality in the enterprise, you need to reach beyond hundreds of people. You need to have the ability to support, which we do, up to 10,000 concurrent users. We can support, in some cases, we've seen some of our customers. And that's very critical because this is how you connect the entire user base, whether it's internal or external, or advertisers or third-party partners, how you actually deploy and energize your ecosystem to drive value of your real-time analytics. I talked about speed, but there's also the aspect of being able to do it while the data is changing. So we're uniquely positioned to be able to support data freshness. So if you do real-time updates or deletes, we're able to support that. And that's obviously very critical because in your enterprise, as you look at making decisions and sometimes you're updating or deleting data, you want to be able to act upon, and we'll talk a lot about insight and action today, about the data you're working on. So make sure it's the latest that you have. And then finally, we do all this in a very simple and easy way. That's why we call real-time analytics made easy. We have reduced the complexity of our data pipeline. We support linear scalability, so you can add actually capability to your platform as you need. And we do that and also by delivering a reduced total cost of ownership to your platform. These are some of the many customers that have adopted the platform across the board, but suffice it to say that Airbnb in the US and some of the other large global firms have already adopted our platform to drive their real-time analytics engine in their organization. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to both Prashanth and Sanjeev to introduce himself. Prashanth, please go ahead.
Hey, Fadi, thank you very much, and it's glad to be with Sanjeev. I've seen him one of the smartest people in the industry, and it's glad to collaborate with Sanjeev and with, of course, CelerData. So about me, basically I do three things. I'm a consultant, I'm an author, and a professor. I've consulted for almost like 80 different companies in my 3 decades of my career in data management, data governance, data analytics, so on, which includes some big names like P&G, Shell, and Apple, but I also some small companies as well, which are about 20-25 members in size and which are less than 5 million in revenue. But the problem, whether you're talking about big or small companies, has been the same. How do we get how do you transform the value of data and analytics and get improved business results? So that's a challenge which all these companies have. I'm also an author. I've written 2 books. You can see behind me, Data for Business Performance Analytics Best Practices. And I write in Forbes too, just to improve the level of education on awareness of data and analytics in the company, along with these kind of sessions like the webinars, which I have. And I teach data analytics for the MBA students at IE Business School in Spain. I just came back from Madrid, and next month I'm again going to Madrid. So that's yeah, that's it about me. I live in Calgary, Canada, by the way.
Great. Well, Sanjeev, up to you now.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. It's a real honor to be here to talk about this really important topic around real-time analytics. And it's always a pleasure to present with Prashanth. My name is Sanjeev. I live here in Toronto, Canada. I'm the VP and Managing Director of a company called Spenscape. Spenscape is the data solutions subsidiary of Moneris. And for those of you who don't know Moneris, we're the largest payment processor in Canada. We process about 3.5 billion credit card and debit card transactions across the country, which gives us a huge insight in terms of what's happening out there. In terms of my background, the mandate of my team is really to leverage this payments data to try to create new value-added products for our customers that are data-driven. And I'll touch on some of those as we go through later today. But just in terms of my background, I've been dabbling with data for throughout my career, whether it was in terms of audit and risk management, or even in forensics, where we did fraud analytics to try to figure out what went wrong. Or more recently, within the data space, the payment data space, and leveraging that to create marketing analytics for some of our clients to help them with their marketing pieces as well.
Very well. Thanks for the introduction, both Sanjeev and Prashanth. So I think the first topic that we want to cover today, so we hear the term real-time analytics very often. Why don't we start with first the basis of what is real-time analytics, what exactly it is?
Okay.
I think that goes to you, Prashanth.
Okay, I'll go with that, and probably Sanjeev can add his thoughts as well. So, there's been a lot of discussions about the term real-time analytics. So it's a great question, Fadi, that you are starting with the fundamentals or the basics and demystifying the term real-time analytics. Right. So in my opinion, when we talk about real-time analytics, it is basically making sure that the data is available to derive insights for decision-making as early as possible. So that's what we are talking about. Given that historically, typically data is a historical record of past business activities. For example, if you look at real-time analytics, again, it is contextual in nature. If you look at an oil refinery, for instance, the real-time insights could be derived within a few seconds or need to be derived in a few seconds. Whereas if you look at back office functions such as finance, for them, they might be defining real-time analytics as even in terms of days or even weeks, for instance, because the insights are not as critical as compared to a refinery, for instance. So bottom line, I defined there are 2 major types of analytics. Again, both of them function of time. One is on-demand real-time analytics, where the users or the system wait to execute a query and to analyze the results or the insights. And next, number 2, the continuous real-time analytics based on thresholds, based on specification limits, based on control limits, where you are taking those appropriate actions because you are getting insights with a very short amount of time.
That makes total sense. Digging a little bit further, Prashanth, you published a great blog discussing the term, and there's a specific term that you mentioned within real-time analytics, decision cycle time. And maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about what you mean by that. Give us a little bit more color around it. That would be great.
Sure. So today, if you look at what companies need, basically, they want to work on the most granular data that is available to them, which is great because a few years back, we were talking about aggregation and all those things, lack of availability of granular data quickly, cost effectively, so on and so forth. So now we are going to the cloud data warehouses, so on and so forth, which is making us give access to the granular data very quickly. They also want to derive insights quickly so that those insights can be transformed into business results. So overall, what we are looking for today, or what the industry is looking for today, is to minimize latency. So when I look at latency, there are two major components within the data latency, within the latency associated with real-time analytics. The first one is the data latency, making sure that the data is available quickly in the data warehouse or any canonical system for the data scientist to work on. So that's the first part of it, of real-time analytics, which is data latency. Next, number two is the query latency. Okay, great. You have this most granular data in the data warehouse. How can we quickly derive those insights by running appropriate queries? So that's the second part of latency, which is a query latency. So our goal is to shrink the decision cycle time. So that means to shrink the time that is available or shrink the latency that is associated. So that's where I was talking about the decision cycle time, which is to enable making quicker decisions, to enable greater productivity, and basically with real-time analytics, you can get advantages or opportunities that could be pretty much missed, or you can even prevent problems before they arise. So overall, when I talk about decision cycle time, Fadi, I was talking about reducing the time available to get access to data, and also reducing the time to get insights.
Got it. That totally makes sense. Thanks for covering that. Sanjeev, I do have a question for you. When you're improving design cycle time, right, that we're talking about, obviously, that is an important KPI. And I wonder, in your industry, how do you quantify or qualify that? Can you suggest even maybe some use cases for real-time analytics that are in the financial services sector that illustrates that? That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, before I jump into that, I think I'm just going to touch on what Prashanth said. He mentioned two aspects that I thought were really important. He talked about the time frames and how those are shortening, and those are, we'll talk about that. But he also talked about the granularity of the data, and that is something that we've noticed over the past few years, especially with clients who come to us with requests, is can we go down to much more granular levels of data, because that's where a lot of the key insights can be pulled. One of the challenges, though, we do see is the more granular you go with the data, sometimes it can affect how accurate the data is. So that's one thing that, as you're designing data solutions to be cognizant of, is there's always this balance between the level of granularity you can go with the data versus what needs to be delivered that'll be effective at helping your user answer the questions that they need to. But turning to decision cycle times, I think that's the other key aspect, which is the time frames around when decisions and when those insights are required. And we are certainly seeing the window being squeezed in terms of how quickly our users need the data, or more importantly, the insights, so that they can make the decisions. As we've seen acceleration of change, complexity, increased competition, both within our own industry in the fintech area, as well as, or the financial services area, as well as across all other industries, it's becoming more and more important for the strategic decision makers of the company, whether it's a company or even in governments, to get the insights faster so that they can make decisions. Because if they miss that window, the effectiveness of their decision reduces. So, just as a quick example, during COVID, we were a lot of the government agencies and the public sector agencies up here in Canada reached out to us, and what they said is, the insights they were receiving around consumer spending, for example, and what the impacts were on businesses and how the economy was doing, typically they would receive that once every quarter or once every month. And they said, that's not good enough during the pandemic. We need a much more higher frequency level of insights. Can you help us with that? And so we reduced that cycle time down to, now it's not real time, but for governments, I guess it's great to give it to them even bi-weekly, because they need that in order to make fast decisions to navigate through the pandemic and minimize impacts to the businesses. And so that's just an example of how the decision cycle times are being squeezed. We're seeing that across the board. And turning to our industry and just some use cases, for example, when we talk about real-time analytics and where we use real-time analytics, I'll give you a few examples. First, like within the financial services sector, risk management obviously is one of the key areas. And we see real-time analytics being used in a number of areas to help us manage risk. One is obviously fraud detection. The ability to, in real time, take a transaction, a credit card transaction, for example, analyze it, score it, and see, what's the probability that this is a fraudulent transaction, so that we could stop it right there before it gets processed. Or even take a look at that transaction, and if it is fraudulent, look at different vectors and say, across different merchants, we're seeing these fraudulent transactions coming through. Maybe we need to block some of these cards to prevent this from happening. Those are things that need to be done in a real-time basis. Otherwise, it loses the effectiveness of managing that fraud. But even around credit risk, so when we board customers or merchants, in the past, we would do this in a much more manual manner, but that meant taking weeks days to weeks to look at the credit history of a customer, score them, and then make a decision on whether we want to onboard that merchant. As competition increases and we're trying to improve the user experience when they sign up with us, we had to go from those days to weeks down to within minutes, so that if a customer is signing up online, we need the ability to analyze them and their profile and make a decision as to whether they're a high credit risk to us or not, and then allow them to sign up. So, because of that, we've implemented real-time processes to allow that. And then even in IT security, another area that's really big within the credit card industry, because God knows how many people are always trying to break into our systems. We have to have real-time systems to prevent and detect, whether we're under an attack or what those attack vectors are, and then immediately take action, and in an automated way, because obviously you can't rely on humans to intervene during that. It has to be done extremely fast. So those are some of the risk examples, but we've also seen this in, for example, marketing, programmatic marketing, which over the past few years has come up, where it allows merchants to bid on different ads and push ads to customers are done within milliseconds, and they analyze the profile of a customer and decide whether they want to push the ad to the customer. But even more important than that is measuring how effective those ad campaigns are. And we launched a product that allows our customers, for example, to measure the effectiveness of their ad campaigns between digital marketing and in-store spending. And we realized when we were building this solution that the marketers needed the results in almost real time, like I would say near real time. So we actually put in a streaming platform that at the time you tap your card on a point of sale terminal, we immediately take that card and we can attribute it to digital marketing efforts to see whether you came to a merchant's website or not. But then, we would aggregate the results, do the statistical analysis every night, and produce the results by the next day. That's extremely fast in the marketing area to provide those results, so marketers can decide whether they need to pivot on some of their campaigns or not. And and we're seeing a lot of that in terms of embedding real-time analytics into different products. You see, whether it's smart thermostats or autonomous cars, those all have to embed now real-time analytics into those products to make them smarter, in order for it to make automated decisions, and then improve the quality of all of the products in that way.
Yeah, thanks for the rich information around this topic. This is very helpful. So again, to you, Sanjeev. So we often talk about the last mile of analytics as enabling the business performance. How does real-time analytics enable the last mile of analytics, so to speak?
Yeah, I would say it's probably important to first distinguish two things. One is the delivery of key insights to decision makers on one side. And the second part is once the insights are delivered to the decision makers, the time it takes and the ability for them to take those insights, interpret them, and make the right decision in terms of what's most effective and what would produce the optimal outcome. Now, real-time analytics, I think, can help in both cases. So in the first case, because as we just mentioned, the decision cycle times are being reduced, that means that we need to deliver the insights to the decision makers at the moment that they need to make that decision. And because they need to make decisions faster, real-time analytics definitely helps in terms of delivering those insights. It's almost like just-in-time insights to be delivered to the decision maker at the moment that they need to make that decision. But I think the second part is equally important, which is because what we find is a lot of businesses don't really know what is the right decision to make. How do you interpret that insight? And many times even some of their biases come into that decision-making process, and they'll interpret the results or the insights in a way that sort of fits into what they want to achieve. Where real-time analytics could help is, or even advanced analytics can help is, it can further take those insights, analyze them, and perhaps even make recommendations to suggest what is the best course of action, which a business may not be aware of. And then it just further helps reduce that. It's the second part, I believe, is what we call the last mile of analytics. And definitely if we can help businesses reduce that time frame and improve the quality of the decisions that they're making, it becomes a competitive advantage for businesses. Just as a quick example, if you have a business insights platform, it's one thing to just give insights to a company to say, when it's raining, your sales are down. Great. But so what? Like, what can I do with that insight? Right. If you can further take that and provide them with actionable insights that says, when this happens, if you give loyalty or do a certain type of offer to your customers, by analyzing across what the results were for other businesses historically, it could actually recommend that doing so, we've typically seen an increase of sales by 10%. That can help the decision maker choose what is the best course of action to take. So I think real-time analytics helps both in both fronts. And as you see more automation of processes and systems, and as you see more complexity, getting to a point where real-time analytics can do both provide and deliver the insights to the decision maker really fast at the time they need to make the decision, but also to provide those actionable recommendations to help the decision maker. Once those both are achieved, I think that would be the ultimate competitive advantage for these businesses.
Yeah, so I think really this, to sum it up, it's really where real-time analytics meets AI, and the ability to use AI and real-time analytics to drive prediction for your business, right? And this is in that. So very good point that you made. Let's just step back a little bit here and take us back to how you build a real-time analytics use cases, solid real-time analytics use cases. And Prashanth, I think I want to address that to you, and perhaps you can take us through your thought process in that.
Yeah, sure, Fadi. The fundamental, as Sanjeev was talking about, the essence of real-time analytics is to leverage time. So we want to make sure that the insights are very contextual, time sensitive, so on and so forth. So I was working for consulting for a utilities company, and I remember the VP in that company saying that, hey, we run our business every day, but I get my insights or report every quarter. So most of so this is not particular to utilities company. I can relate it to many other industries as well. So lack of insights which are timely are affecting the business performance. So basically, delayed insights is practically bad insights, or delayed decision is basically a bad decision. So in this backdrop, I would say there are 5 key things. We can talk about lots of elements that are part of the use cases, but I just want to emphasize on 5 key elements that are important to build a use cases specifically for real-time analytics. The first one is start at the top. understand the business levers and KPIs. Okay, Prashanth, we have heard this, but can you throw some more light on this? Next, number two, as Sanjeev was talking about the last mile of analytics. So look at what decisions you need, what decision you need to make, and what data is required to make the decisions. So most of the time, what I see in my consulting projects is typically we start with the left side of the analytics lifecycle. So what is that left side? Look at your business objective and what data you have and try to produce insights, and then go to the business and say, hey, do you want this insights? They say, what for, right? But instead, look at what decisions are required to be made and then find out the insights and then look at the data which is required to make those insights. Just go to the other side as well. So in real-time analytics, you can save a lot of time and effort if you look from the right side that focus on decisions and then go back to the left side, which is aligning to your business objectives. Next, number three is about finding that decision owner who will ensure that the decisions align with the business outcomes. So many times we produce those great report use cases, but we don't know whose problem are we solving. So there's a saying, right? Everybody's problem is nobody's problem. So we need to find that owner who can help us, who can take the leadership here and take it across the line. The fourth thing, which Sanjeev also said many times in the last few minutes, is about the frequency of insights involved in making decisions. How often, how quickly you need those insights. And lastly, it's about the capabilities that are required to make those real-time analytics happen. So these are the 5 key things which I would focus on to build a good real use cases for real-time analytics.
That totally makes sense. Thanks for walking us through that. And I think teeing off on the last topic, which is, okay, now that you got to the last point, the last stage, which is, hey, what solutions or capabilities do I need for my company? And this is really addressed to both of you, both from your perspective, and perhaps one of you can get started on it. I think Prashanth, you're happy.
Okay.
It'd be great if you could start, and then maybe we can turn it over to Sanjeev.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go first, and probably Sanjeev can add his thoughts as well.
Yeah.
So in my book, Analytics Best Practices, I have laid out 5 key elements or capabilities that are required for a successful data analytics program. The first one is data culture. So you might say, what is this data culture? I have heard this a million times, especially in LinkedIn, Twitter, and all those things. People are talking about data culture. What is this? So in my view, data analytics is fundamentally about measurement and performance improvement. So if you're not focused on measurement and using those measures to improve your performance, then forget about data analytics. You're not going very far. It will just going to be insights just for theoretical purposes, which are not actionable, which are not useful to anything. So your data culture has to be tied to measurement and performance improvement. That's number one. Next, number two is about education. You might be having the greatest insights and KPIs, but if the people in the company are not able to understand what these KPIs are, like, for example, inventory turnover, simple things, inventory turnover, customer churn, recurring revenue. You might have the greatest insights, but so what? Well, how can I use it? So the number two is about education, about literacy, which is number two. Next, number three is about the tools. You need the technology tools to make it happen, because when you're talking about speed, scale, consistency, security, so on and so forth, you need the technology tools, because that's where you make things happen. Next, number four, the fuel for data analytics, including real-time analytics, is good quality data. If you don't have quality data, you can't trust the insights which are coming. And lastly, about the governance, making sure that the process is good, the right users have got right access to the data, confidentiality, data engineering aspects are taken care, the stakeholder management, so on and so forth. So I would say, Sanjeev, in my experience, for real-time analytics, you need 5 major things. Number one, data culture, data literacy, technology. Number 4, good quality data. And next, number 5, governance.
Yeah. I would certainly agree with those 5. Perhaps what I can do is I'd like to just dig deeper maybe into a couple of them, especially around the last 2. You mentioned the quality of data and data governance, and what I see is that there can be pitfalls and challenges that could get amplified by real-time analytics, and these are things that perhaps people need to make sure and consider as you're building out data solutions. So just in terms of the quality of data, one of the things that we see is around data bias. I talked about bias in terms of people's own bias when they were interpreting the insights, but obviously there is bias within data. And I don't think I've come across any data set so far that I haven't seen some sort of bias within the data itself. Data is I've always said, data is as dirty as oil. And data on its own does not have any intrinsic value in it until you work on it and produce some outcome from that. But the bias that's in the data is really key, especially as you move towards real-time analytics, because if you don't at least identify what those biases are, understand how they could impact the outcomes of it, when you have real-time analytics, it could just get amplified in terms of the results. And as people rely on the output of that data or the insights and start making decisions based on that in a faster, more high frequency way, that could amplify even the incorrect decisions that they could end up making. So understanding what are those biases, and as much as possible to try and address the bias in the data, either by addressing it directly or supplementing it with other data sources to help to try reduce or minimize the bias or increase the accuracy of what the insights are showing is really important, or at least disclose what those potential inaccuracies might be in the data so the user is aware of it. The other area which touches more around data governance would be, I guess, privacy. And privacy laws obviously are really important and must be a capability that's part of a company. You need to understand what privacy laws impact your business and what you're trying to achieve. And especially if it's data that you're using to create products, that becomes a really important element of that. Privacy laws are changing. They are complex, and as they change, those new rules need to be built into the data solution that you've created. So, we typically have a privacy by design approach to designing any solution. But as you move to real-time analytics, being able to incorporate the new privacy rules or the changes into your system is on one side really important, but you also have to keep in mind that it does perhaps change some of the results that are produced. And if you're using things like machine learning, which are looking historically at insights to try and make a best prediction around things, how does that change that you've just made because of a privacy law change impact what the machine learning tools are being used as you're training them? So just something to keep in mind. The last point I'll touch on, which Prashanth also mentioned when he was talking about how to design for a use case, is around being clear around the business objective. And I think that's the number one most important thing, is being very clear around what is it that either you or your users are trying to achieve. What is the job to be, quote unquote, job to be done over here? Just as a silly example, a company that produces hammers might say, or drills might say that our job is to sell drills. But if you look at it from a customer's point of view, it's to make a hole. And really, when you're looking at data solutions and you're designing data solutions, you really need to know from your user's point of view, what is it that they're trying to achieve? And our experience in talking to many different clients is that their needs are usually ambiguous. They have a general sense of, this is what I'm trying to look for. They don't know how data necessarily will help them. And that's where the role of the data scientist and the data analytics person really becomes important, is to take their ambiguous needs, but then turn them into a solution that really answers their needs. Anyone can go and do coding and can program something. But having that business mindset, I think, is equally important. And when we hire data science people and data product people, one of the key capabilities we look for is, do they have not just the coding and the technical aspects, but also the business sense, the street smarts to really understand what is it that the user is trying to achieve, and then how can I design this in the right way? And as Prashanth even mentioned, the right KPIs that will help them to make that decision that they need to do.
So, Fadi, I just want to share one small small anecdote to what Sanjeev just said about biases. So there are hundreds of biases which are often discussed in the area of data analytics. But one biases which I've been increasingly finding these days is what I call it as an IKEA bias. So, so generally, what is this? So people say that when you take your loyalty towards IKEA furnitures is higher because you feel that you have built that furniture, unlike some furnitures which you have generally bought it. So they say that people don't want to dispose of IKEA furnitures as quickly and as easily compared to other ready-made furnitures which they bought. The same thing I have found often in data analytics is about the IKEA bias. So people who have built the models are not ready to give it up. They have a sense of ownership and they defend it, and they're not ready to reframe the problem and all those things. So of late, I have seen that along with many other biases like availability, framing, selection, so on and so forth, the IKEA bias is also playing a big role, at least in my consulting clients.
Yeah, I love the analogy there. Thanks for bringing that up. Definitely, I totally get it. That makes sense. So we have a number of questions that came through the Q&A chat, and I invite people to continue to pose those. Why don't we take the time to start answering some of those questions? So the first one, topic related, can you walk us through the technology stack that supports real-time analytics? What are the core pieces of infrastructure that need to be in place? This is probably both of you, because there's an academic part, or and then there's a more real application part for you, Sanjeev. Maybe you can talk through that as well.
So, Fadi, if you don't mind, I can go first and look at the kind of the technology questions which are there. I see that this anonymous user, I don't see his name, has asked quite a few questions related to technology. So I just looked at all the questions. So I'll just summarize them, and probably somebody from StarRocks or CelerData can also add more. So when you look at the technology stack, instead of getting specific to the tools, in fact, there is a third block and a webinar that is coming soon next month, where we talk about the solutions, or including the technology components as well, which stay tuned for that webinar. But for now, just to whet the curiosity here, I will look at the 4 major reference architectures that are part of this real-time analytics technology stack. The first is to minimize the number of denormalized tables which you have in the data warehouse. So that's get good performance from whatever schemas you have, Star, Snowflake, etc., etc. So bottom line is, number 1 is try to minimize or even eliminate the number of the tables. The next, number 2, is about the data updates and deletes. Make sure that your application can easily handle them, quickly handle them. The changes which you have in your data, that's changes that are happening. Number 3 is focus on streaming data, which includes the telemetry data as well. So we did a study in my company, and we found that by 2025, almost like 40% of the data footprint in a company is going to be from telemetry data. So this is like a huge footprint of data which companies are going to have. And how do you manage this telemetry data going forward? So you need solutions on streaming analytics to handle this kind of situations. And lastly, about the pure technology aspects, which is about storage and computing. So when you have about hundreds and perhaps even thousands of concurrent users, like what you have with the Airbnb, the case study or example which you gave earlier. So these are the 4 major reference architectures which I can talk for now. So we'll explain more in the next blog and in the next webinar about the technology stack. Probably somebody from CelerData can also come during that webinar and share more details. But right now, I would leave it at this, and probably go over to Sanjeev can share more about the technology part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk too much about the technology because I tend to come from more of the business side of things. I mean, I know, and I'll talk more high level, but I know for the solution that we built around the marketing analytics piece, we did install Kafka servers to do the real-time streaming of the data itself, the transactional data, so that we could take it from a point of sale terminal and be able to then use that and then try to what we call attribute that to the visits to a website. And even on the website side, we stream a lot of the data itself. The actual analytics, though, it runs a very, very complex algorithm on the back end. And so I'm not very familiar. I had my development team build out that piece of it, where we do the attribution, what we call the multi-touch attribution in real time. But the results of that get stored, and in terms of then running statistical projections, those are run nightly, and the results are then stored in a 3-dimensional cube. I believe it's an OLAP cube, where those get then filtered into a dynamic platform that we provide to our users. So in this way, users can basically select any sort of dimension on the platform in terms of the different channels or campaigns that they're running, different time periods, and it very quickly produces the result and shows the result to them. That's the extent of the technology side, I would say, of it. But because it's real time, it also means that we have to monitor the platform a lot more. And if there are any errors in it, it means we need to catch them quickly and be able to address those also very fast on the platform.
Thanks, Sanjeev. Thanks, Prashanth. And I think, as Prashanth was saying, in our next webinar, which is coming up over the next month or so, we will dig deeper into the solution, and specifically CelerData's solution that addresses that. But suffice it to say, I think one of the other questions were, can you speak to how CelerData is uniquely positioned to solve these real-time data needs? I covered it a little earlier, certainly happy to go over that, but really these are the 4 pillars that more or less align to the reference architecture points that Prashanth was bringing up. We'll go into more details around what's behind it, what's the technology behind it, and the rocket science behind it. But really is about being able to query the flexibility of supporting both flat and multi-table joins, the ability to scale very quickly to handle many, many concurrent users, the ability to support real-time insight even when you're updating or deleting data, and you want to be able to do it in a simple way as you scale your business, because you can't afford that complexity and cost. So those are the basic tenets for how CelerData actually, with StarRock's engine, supports that. The next question is around real-time security, and I think we've touched upon it a little bit, particularly for fraud detection. I don't know if either of you have any additional points you want to make here. That would be fine. That'd be great.
So maybe I can just touch on some of the aspects from an IT security standpoint. It really depends on, because there are many different tools and there are different elements of security that need to be addressed. So there's network security, for example, where you want to try and prevent external hackers from accessing the system, and you would have tools that would be continuously detecting traffic into the networks and trying to block those. They could, and that ties into even denial of service attacks, and being able to detect when you might be under an attack and immediately taking an action in an automated way around that. So we've got tools that address that aspect of it. But there are other parts of security as well. There's application security, and there are a number of different tools that I'm seeing now, which can look at application level security and try to determine whether that's appropriate or not, or try to block those if it's something that shouldn't be there. There's another aspect, at least in our industry, which is data loss prevention, and that ties into credit card data, because we handle a lot of like billions of transactions, and being able to secure credit card information is really key in our industry. And you've got a lot of employees out there that have laptops, and we need to make sure that they're not inadvertently sending out a message that may contain a credit card and piece of information, because there are a lot of rules like PCI DSS compliance rules that we need to make sure that we comply with. So, even on our laptops, we've got tools that are there that are analyzing every single piece of information that gets sent out from our laptops and tries to detect if any of them may have credit card information and would immediately block that. So there are a number of different tools depending on the various types of security or vulnerabilities that you're trying to detect or prevent outside. I keep saying hackers, I shouldn't use that term, but anyone from exploiting those vulnerabilities. There would be a number of different IT security tools that are available to do that.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Sanjeev. Another question is actually interesting. It's around skills. So the question goes like this: is it reasonable to expect that a traditional data scientist, engineer or / engineer will be able to stand up and derive insights from real-time data infrastructure stack, or do they need additional skills to deal with streaming data? Could either of you, or probably maybe Prashanth, can speak to this because he comes across skills a lot?
Yeah. Okay, again, I'll go first and Sanjeev can add me. So I would elevate, this is a great question, but I would elevate this question to a little bit higher and talk about the skills required for data and analytics, including real-time analytics, which is asked here. So we talk often the hard skills required for data analytics, which is like, okay, the math skills or the statistics skills, IT programming skills like R, Python, or even Excel for that matter, all those things, which are good. I'm not, or even business skills, which are all good. So you need those hard skills to work. But at the same time, there are many soft skills also that are required to make things happen. And unfortunately, we don't discuss those soft skills very often. Like yesterday, I did an interview for a finance education company based in Denmark, and the interviewer asked me this great question. He said, "What are the soft skills required for data analytics?" So I call them as 3 C's. The first one is about having good communication. So which not just about talking or writing, which is also about listening, because always you have to listen to your business to see what their problem is. So the first C is about communication. The second C is about collaboration. You are always collaborating with different teams. You might be a data scientist, but you can't be sitting in your ivory tower and churning out insights where nobody wants it. You need to work with your data engineer, get the data, business, IT, so on and so forth. So it's a collaborative thing when you talk about analytics, including real-time analytics. And the third thing which I would see is the third C is critical thinking. Which is looking at the problem, asking, well, have you framed the question well? Is there any framing bias? Like Sanjeev mentioned about biases. Looking at the problem and going deeper into it. And also about making good decisions, because at some point in time, when you are asking, when you are deriving insights, there might be a situation where data might give up. So you need to make some decisions with uncertainty, though you might have the greatest insights which you got on near real-time basis, but still, how do you work on those skills? So overall, those hard skills, which are very important, I'm not disputing that they're really required, but in my experience, the soft skills matter a lot as well. So don't ignore the soft skills and look at least these 3 C's going forward.
That's a very good point. I would forget them. Go ahead.
I would completely agree. I think, Prashanth, you nailed it in terms of both the hard skills and the soft skills. Perhaps I would add 2 more C's to the soft skills. One is be creative in terms of how you design the solution. Once you understand what the user's required is asking for, and as I said, many times they don't even know what they want. It's ambiguous, and so you need to be creative in designing the solution. And then be curious, and there's a lot of data out there that you need to look at and see how is this going to help to create that solution for the end user, and then keep learning more about the data that you have and maybe the data that you don't have that you need to get as well.
Great.
Yeah, I love it, Sanjeev. So in my next talk, if somebody asks me the soft skills, I will go from 3 to 5 now.
5, absolutely.
Great. Another question is really about market trends, so to speak, and both of them. One is about how should we think about the importance of real-time data? Is it pervasive? almost all use cases need real-time data, or is it still emerging? I mean, obviously, from my perspective, yes, it is. It's happening. Is it completely pervasive? Not, but it's increasing significantly. But I'll turn it over to you guys.
I mean, from a business standpoint, and what we see in the market, and there may be also. So I'll just caveat this with Canada might be a little bit different from the US, but from what we see, I would say it's still emerging. There are obviously, as mentioned earlier, there are lots of use cases where real-time analytics are definitely required, even from a competitive advantage, or even just the nature of the use case requires it to be real-time. But we've also seen many cases where users are, even though the decision cycle times are reducing, it hasn't reached a point yet where they require it real time or near real time. I mean, getting, you look at public sector, government agencies, for them getting results once a month is sufficient, or once every 2 weeks might be sufficient. So it really depends on what is that use case of the user. Prashanth mentioned as one of his steps is understand what your decision is and what you need, but also understand how frequently do you need the results. And so we're seeing a mix of it right now, where some cases it might be real time, but in many cases it's not necessarily real time. They need it once a month, once a quarter even. We've had merchants that need insights. It's a one-time insight and it's good enough for them, and they don't need it regularly. So for example, if they're trying to decide where should I open up my next store, we certainly help them by showing them across different regions, what's the spending like in those areas. But it's to make that one decision, and it's not a decision that they need to make on a regular basis. It's more of a strategic decision. So I would say it really depends on your use case, and it is emerging, but we are sort of heading towards a faster decision cycle times, which means real-time analytics will help.
All right. Prashanth, do you want to add anything to this? Or
no, I'm good. So it is yeah, but nothing more. Fadi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. The last question we have here before we wrap up the session, really about the target markets. Is it an SMB play or a large enterprise play? Do you need a big team, development team to do real-time analytics? I'll have just a word on this before I turn it over to you guys. That's why at CelerData, we invented StarRocks, right? The engine is to make it simple to use and really to make it very pervasive. It's about democratizing the use for not just large organizations, but SMBs, and certainly making it cloud ready is very well suited for SMB plays as well. But Prashanth, why don't you go first from your perspective?
Yeah. So, as we discussed earlier on the use cases thing, it's all depends on the use cases. And when we talk about real-time analytics, we are looking at how do we leverage time, because fundamentally delayed decision or delayed insights is practically bad insights or bad decisions. So if you believe in this, or if your industry is in that sector, or even if your function is in that time-sensitive situation, then you have a case for real-time analytics, whether you are a small company, medium, or a large corporate. So this is where, like for example, I personally think if you are in the manufacturing or plant, like safety, like refinery, for example, there could be more use cases on real-time analytics compared to functions such as procurement or finance, which are mainly back, or even HR, which are kind of a back office functions. Of course, the degree of use cases vary, but bottom line is whether you're in finance or in refinery, if you believe that you need insights which are very time sensitive, then you have a case for real-time analytics.
Absolutely. Completely agree. The use case really drives, how whether it's relevant. And there are use cases even in the small business area, or if you think of a startup, I mean, you may be designing a new product, and in order to make your product stand out and have a unique selling factor, you may want to embed real-time analytics within your product itself. We talked about smart smart thermostats, or it could be even an investment platform where you're taking trade data and trying to recommend certain actions to investors. So there are a lot of these startups, whether they're in the fintech space or in other spaces, that are now taking data and trying to embed them into their products to make their products stand out and be better. So again, depending on your use case, there is definitely value for real-time analytics, even in the SMB space, as well as enterprise. And I'm happy to hear CelerData is really democratizing that aspect of it and allowing smaller businesses even to take the data and run the analytics in more of a real-time manner.
Great. There's one last question that came in here, and I think we're going to need to wrap up after that. But the question is, will CelerData still be valuable for those cases where it's more real-time, but not fully real-time? In other words, it's every week or so, or is CelerData mostly valuable when it's fully real-time? The way I would think about the problem, I would flip the question. The question is, are you on a road to do digital transformation? Are you actually trying to extract data more fully in real time to affect those services? If you're on that path, CelerData is there for you to support you. Obviously, it's you take full advantage capability of the platform when you have full real-time capability. We can support updates. We can support an analytics in real time when you're doing updates and deletes. Obviously, that's where it's valuable and where your organization is going. So that's how you should be thinking about it. Technology is there to help organizations to actually rethink their problems. And I think what we do at CelerData is really help you in that rethinking of your digital transformation. That's how you should think about it. I think we've covered a lot of, Prashanth, you want to?
There's one comment. I think I got a question saying that will there be slides of this? So the answer is no, because we thought that because there is increasing amount of Zoom fatigue and webinar fatigue that's going on in the industry, so we changed the format to be more conversational rather than dumping slides and discussing slides. So we want to be a conversation. However, the material is we have made some notes and I will post it in LinkedIn in just a few minutes from now, number one. Next, number two, we have the blog which I have written, which is in the CelerData website. And next, number three, this whole conversation is recorded, so you can access it after this presentation as well.
Absolutely, and we will have that the webinar recording on YouTube. We'll post it on our website. We'll have it available on LinkedIn, so which I invite you to follow our page at CelerData. With that, I want to thank the audience for participating today. We really appreciate your participation, your questions, the engaging conversations we had. I want to also thank our participant, Prashanth, and Sanjeev for helping us today and for taking all those topics and questions, and certainly thank the entire audience here. I hope everyone have a great day, great evening, great afternoon, wherever you are.
See you everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.